You were going to sleep tonight. That was the plan. Close your eyes. Let the day go. Drift off. Simple. But I have to tell you something. Something that the people who study the origin of life, the people who analyze meteorites and run experiments on the International Space Station and drill into the ocean floor looking for ancient rocks, something that those people know and that most of the world has never really sat with. It is not complicated. It does not require any scientific background to understand. But once you have heard it, it will change the way you look at the night sky. And it might make sleep a little harder to find tonight. Not because it is frightening, because it is so strange and so beautiful and so genuinely unresolved that your mind may not want to let it go. We do not know if life on Earth began here. That is not a fringe claim. That is not conspiracy. That is the current position of mainstream astrobiology, the science of life in the universe, as published in the peer-reviewed journals that the best scientists in the world submit their work to. We know how to build a computer. We know how to split an atom. We know the age of the universe to within 100 million years. We have landed on the moon, sent probes past the edge of the solar system, photographed black holes 55 million light-years away. And we do not know where life came from. We do not know if it assembled itself here, from the chemistry of early Earth, or whether it arrived, already alive, inside a rock, from somewhere else. Both are possible. Neither has been ruled out. And the evidence that has accumulated in the last 30 years, the meteorites, the space station experiments, the Martian rocks, the thing that flew through our solar system in 2017 from another star, makes this question not just possible but urgent. Where did the life in you come from? Not your parents, not your grandparents, not your species. The life, the actual biological process that has been running unbroken for somewhere between 3.7 and 4.2 billion years, passed from organism to organism in an unbroken chain stretching back to the first living thing on this planet, wherever that first living thing came from. We're going to go through the evidence tonight. All of it. Carefully, calmly, in order. The meteorite in Australia. The bacteria that survived space. The rock from Mars. The visitor from another star. The Nobel Prize winner who co-discovered DNA and concluded that its origin was almost miraculous. The cosmic chemistry that fills the space between stars. You're made of atoms. Right now, as you lie still, every atom in your body is billions of years old. The carbon atoms in your DNA were forged inside a star that exploded before our sun was born. You know this in a general way, but here is what they rarely tell you. Some of those atoms, as they drifted through the void of space for billions of years, may have been part of something alive, on a world that no longer exists. Long before they arrived here and became you. Every living thing on Earth, every bacterium, every mushroom, every insect, every tree, every whale, every human, uses exactly the same genetic code. Not a similar code, the same code, the same mapping of DNA sequences to the same amino acids, preserved identically across 4 billion years of evolution. Why? If life arose independently in multiple locations on Earth, you would expect different codes to have developed. The fact that every single living thing uses the same one suggests a single origin. One moment, one place, one beginning. The question is, was that place here? In September 1969, a rock fell from the sky over a quiet town in the state of Victoria, Australia. The rock had been traveling through space for 4.6 billion years, since before the Earth existed. Inside that rock, scientists found amino acids, the same amino acids your body uses to build proteins. They found the sugar that forms the backbone of RNA. They found the chemical letters of DNA. Inside a rock, from space, that was older than the ground it landed on. In October 2017, a telescope in Hawaii detected something moving through our solar system at 196,000 miles per hour. No object born in our solar system moves at that speed. It had come from another star. It was cigar-shaped, roughly 400 meters long, reddish in color. It had no comet tail, and as it moved away from the sun, it was accelerating in a way that astronomers could not fully explain for several years. We watched it for a few weeks. Then it was gone forever. We will never see it again. We do not know with certainty what it was, but it was the first confirmed visitor from another solar system, and it passed within 15 million miles of Earth, 60 times the distance to the moon, without us knowing it was coming. The impossible speed of life. Let us start with a timeline, because timing is everything, and the timing of life's arrival on this planet is the first thing that demands a careful explanation. The solar system formed approximately 4.567 billion years ago. A vast cloud of gas and dust, the remnant of previous generations of stars that had lived and died, collapsed under its own gravity. The center became the sun. The remaining material flattened into a disk and slowly aggregated into planets, moons, asteroids, and comets. Earth assembled from this disk over tens of millions of years. For the first several hundred million years, Earth was not a hospitable place. The planet was molten from the heat of its formation and from continuous impacts by the debris still filling the inner solar system. The surface had no stable crust to speak of. The atmosphere was thick with volcanic gases, carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, water vapor. The oceans, as they formed from the delivery of water by comets and asteroids, were regularly boiled away by major impacts and reformed as the planet cooled between collisions. This period, sometimes called the Hadean, named after the Greek underworld, lasted from Earth formation at 4.567 billion years ago to roughly 4 billion years ago. The name fits. It was, by any measure, hellish. By approximately 4.3 to 4.4 billion years ago, something important happened. The bombardment rate declined enough for the first stable liquid water to appear and persist on Earth's surface. We know this from zircon crystals, tiny mineral grains that form in the presence of water and preserve a chemical record of their formation conditions. Zircons dated to 4.4 billion years ago, found in ancient rocks in Western Australia's Jack Hills, show isotopic signatures consistent with formation in cool, liquid water environments. The planet was becoming, for the first time, a place where chemistry could accumulate, where molecules could react without being immediately destroyed, where long, complex chains of organic chemistry could build up over time without being vaporized by the next major impact. The window had opened. The question is how quickly life walked through it. The answer is shocking. In 2024, a team of researchers published a study in the journal Nature Ecology and Evolution that forced the scientific community to reckon with the speed of life's emergence in a new way. The team used a technique called molecular clock analysis, which estimates the ages of biological lineages by measuring how their genetic sequences have diverged over time, to date the last universal common ancestor of all life on Earth. LUCA, the last universal common ancestor, the single ancestral organism from which every living thing on this planet descends. Every bacterium, every plant, every fungus, every animal, every human being can trace its lineage back through billions of years of evolution to a single population of cells. LUCA is the root of the entire tree of life. The 2024 study dated LUCA to approximately 4.2 billion years ago. The confidence interval ran from 4.09 to 4.33 billion years ago. Let that date settle. The earliest stable liquid water appeared around 4.3 to 4.4 billion years ago. LUCA existed by approximately 4.2 billion years ago. That is a window of somewhere between 100 and 200 million years. 100 million years sounds like an eternity, but you need to understand what LUCA already was when it appeared. LUCA was not simple. The same 2024 study reconstructed the genome of Luca from the genetic sequences shared across all living things today. What they found was not a simple molecule, not a primitive string of RNA. Luca had a genome of at least 2.5 megabytes of information, encoding approximately 2,600 proteins. It had a functioning metabolism. It had a primitive immune system, including what appeared to be CRISPR-Cas proteins, the molecular scissors that modern science uses to edit DNA. It was already defending itself from viruses. Luca was not a protocell. It was a complex, sophisticated microorganism, comparable in molecular machinery to modern bacteria, already living as part of an ecosystem with other microbial organisms. And it appeared within 100 to 200 million years of the first stable liquid water on Earth's surface. The origin of life is one of the great unsolved problems in science. In 1952, Stanley Miller and Harold Urey demonstrated that amino acids could form spontaneously from simple molecules under electrical discharge. The field has made extraordinary progress since. We know that amino acids can form in space, in hydrothermal vents, and under ultraviolet light. The RNA world hypothesis, the idea that life began as self-replicating RNA molecules, is widely considered the most plausible framework for abiogenesis. But assembling something as complex as Luca, with its 2,600 proteins, its immune system, its metabolism, in 100 to 200 million years, has never been reproduced in any laboratory. Not because chemists are not clever enough, but because we do not yet fully understand the complete sequence. In 2025, astronomer David Kipping of Columbia University published a formal statistical analysis. Using Bayesian mathematics, he calculated 13 to 1 odds in favor of the hypothesis that life emerges quickly when conditions are suitable. For the first time, there is formally strong scientific evidence that abiogenesis is a rapid process. But here is the critical nuance. Rapid abiogenesis on Earth does not prove that life began on Earth. It is equally consistent with the hypothesis that life arrived, because if life can arrive and establish itself quickly, and if it arrived within the narrow window after the first liquid water, we would see exactly the timeline we observe. The evidence tells us life appeared fast. It does not yet tell us where it came from. If life appeared within 100 to 200 million years of the first stable liquid water, then one of two things must be true. Either life assembles itself from chemistry very efficiently, in which case the universe is probably teeming with life, or life did not assemble itself here at all. It arrived, already assembled, from somewhere else that had more time. Both possibilities are remarkable. Both remain open. The question is not whether it can happen. The question is whether it has happened. And the best place to start looking for answers is in a collection of rocks that have been sitting in laboratories around the world for 55 years, constantly revealing new secrets every time someone looks more carefully. Before we look at the physical evidence, let us spend a moment appreciating how strange the Luca finding actually is. Imagine you're watching a time-lapse of Earth's history. You start 4.56 billion years ago, when the planet is a molten ball covered in impact craters, with no stable surface and no liquid water. You fast forward. At 4.4 billion years ago, the first zircon crystals form in the presence of cool liquid water. You note the timestamp. The clock starts here. At 4.2 billion years ago, just 200 million years later, in a timeline that spans 4.5 billion years, a living organism exists on Earth. Not a simple molecule. A living organism with a genome, a metabolism, a cell membrane, an immune system, the ability to reproduce, and the capacity to evolve. 200 million years. In a 4.5 billion year timeline, that is less than 5% of Earth's total age. If you compressed Earth's history into a single 24-hour day, Life appeared within the first hour and 12 minutes. Consider what had to happen in those 200 million years. Simple organic molecules had to assemble from simpler precursors. Those molecules had to find each other in a vast ocean. They had to form polymers without enzymes to catalyze the process. Some had to fold into shapes that could catalyze chemistry. One combination had to begin replicating. Replication had to be imperfect enough to allow evolution. And evolution had to produce, in the time available, a system capable of building a cell membrane, a metabolic pathway, a genetic code, a translation machinery, and an immune system. Each of those steps is chemically plausible. The full sequence, in 200 million years, has never been reproduced in a laboratory. This is not an argument against abiogenesis, but it is an argument for keeping the alternative hypothesis on the table. Because if life arrived here already assembled, then we would observe exactly this timeline. Life appears fast because it did not have to start from scratch. The rock that fell from the sky. The town of Murchison sits in the flat, dry landscape of central Victoria, Australia, approximately 160 kilometers north of Melbourne. In 1969, it was a small farming community, wheat fields, sheep stations, the kind of place where mornings are quiet and the sky at dawn is enormous. At approximately 10:58 in the morning, the quiet ended. Residents described a brilliant light in the sky, brighter than the sun, moving rapidly. Then a sound like thunder, but wrong. Not the rolling sound of a storm, but a series of distinct concussive booms, each separated from the last by a few seconds, echoing across the flat land. Some people felt the ground shake. The sound was heard as far as Melbourne. Then there was a smell. Several residents independently reported an unusual odor. Some described it as like methylated spirits, others as sulfurous. The smell was coming from the sky. Shortly afterward, fragments of dark rock began to appear. In paddocks, on roofs, in gardens. Each fragment had a thin, dark outer crust. The fusion crust formed when the surface of a rock is ablated by the heat of atmospheric entry. Inside, the rock was pale gray and grainy, with tiny white inclusions. Over the following days, more than 100 kilograms of material was recovered. What had fallen on Murchison was a carbonaceous chondrite, a primitive meteorite, rich in carbon compounds, formed in the earliest period of the solar system, 4.6 billion years ago. Because the fall was witnessed and fragments collected within hours, contamination from Earth was minimal. Scientists had something extraordinarily rare, a pristine chemical sample from the ancient solar system, delivered directly to them, intact and fresh. The initial analysis, published in the journal Nature in 1970, confirmed what many had hoped but fewer had expected: amino acids. Multiple amino acids. And critically, isotopic analysis showed that they matched the signature of cosmic chemistry rather than terrestrial biology. They were not contamination. They were from space. They were 4.6 billion years old. More than 70 amino acids have now been identified in Murchison. Of those, more than 50 do not exist anywhere on Earth. They are entirely extraterrestrial molecules, which definitively rules out contamination. Among the amino acids that do exist on Earth, the ones used by all life to build proteins, Murchison contains several: glycine, alanine, glutamic acid, valine, proline. The molecular letters from which every protein in every organism that has ever lived is written, and they were inside a rock from space. But of all the findings from the Murchison meteorite, the most philosophically striking is not the presence of amino acids. It is their orientation. Amino acids come in two mirror image forms, left-handed and right-handed. Chemistry produces them in equal amounts. There is no physical reason, in a random chemical reaction, why you should get more of one than the other. All life on Earth uses exclusively left-handed amino acids to build proteins. Not mostly, exclusively. Why life settled on left-handed amino acids is one of the deepest unsolved mysteries in biochemistry. It is called the homochirality problem. In 1997, John Cronin and Sandra Pizzarello of Arizona State University published a study in Science examining the handedness of amino acids in Murchison. Specifically, the non-protein amino acids, the ones with no terrestrial equivalent, ruling out contamination. What they found was a small but consistent excess of L forms, a bias toward left, the same handedness that all life on Earth exhibits. Whether this cosmic L bias seeded Earth's biology with its left-handedness, whether the amino acids in meteorites like Murchison tipped the chemistry of early Earth toward L forms, is not known. But the fact is extraordinary. A rock from space, older than the Earth, containing the building blocks of life with the same chirality as all life on Earth. In 2019, a study confirmed the presence of ribose in Murchison, the sugar that forms the backbone of RNA. The study also found all straight-chain 5-carbon sugars, the structural components of the nucleotides that make up genetic material. In 2020, uracil, one of the 4 chemical letters of RNA, was confirmed as genuinely cosmic by carbon isotope analysis. The letters of the code that all life on Earth uses to store and transmit information were present in a rock from space. In 2010, a team of European researchers applied high-resolution mass spectrometry to a sample of Murchison and identified more than 14,000 distinct molecular compounds. The team estimated that the full meteorite may contain millions of unique organic molecules. The chemical complexity of the Murchison meteorite rivals that of the early Earth's ocean. In January 2020, silicon carbide grains within Murchison were dated to approximately 7 billion years old. The Earth is 4.56 billion years old. The solar system is 4.6 billion years old. The universe is 13.8 billion years old. These grains formed inside stars that lived and died 2.5 billion years before our sun was born. They drifted through interstellar space for billions of years before being swept up into our solar system, incorporated into the Murchison parent body, and delivered to us Sunday morning in Victoria in 1969. The universe has been producing the chemistry of life for at least 7 billion years. The Earth has only been around for 4.56 billion of them. It is worth pausing to appreciate what the Murchison meteorite represents, even in the most conservative interpretation, that it delivered chemistry, not life. The early Earth was not a pristine environment. It was a volcanic, acidic, radiation-bombarded surface being continuously struck by incoming rocks. The chemistry of abiogenesis had to happen against this backdrop. What the continuous rain of organic material from space, from meteorites like Murchison, from comets, from interplanetary dust, would have provided is a constant supply of preformed organic molecules arriving at the surface. Not just any organic molecules, the specific ones most relevant to life, the amino acids, the sugars, the nucleobases. Estimates of the flux of organic material delivered to early Earth by meteorites and interplanetary dust particles range from tens of millions to hundreds of millions of kilograms per year. Much would have been destroyed on impact or in the atmosphere. But even a fraction surviving and accumulating in protected environments, in tidal pools, in hydrothermal systems, in ice, would represent an enormous chemical head start. This is what origin of life researchers call the exogenous delivery hypothesis. Life did not have to synthesize its own starting materials from scratch. The starting materials arrived ready-made from space. Even if every living thing on Earth is the product of chemistry that began here, it began with ingredients that came from elsewhere. In that sense, we are all, in part, made of meteorites. What lies in the void? The evidence from a Murchison meteorite establishes that the building blocks of life exist in space and can survive the journey to Earth inside a rock. But there is a larger question that must be addressed. Can life itself, not just its chemical precursors, but actual living organisms, survive in space? Space is hostile in ways that are difficult to fully appreciate. The temperature in deep space is approximately 2.7 degrees above absolute zero. There is no atmosphere, no pressure, no protection from radiation. Charged particles from the sun and cosmic rays from distant supernovae travel in every direction, capable of shattering DNA and destroying the chemical structures that life depends on. This question, the survivability question, has been tested directly. The results are more surprising than most people realize. Deinococcus radiodurans was first discovered in 1956 when scientists were attempting to sterilize canned meat using gamma radiation. They irradiated the cans with doses large enough to kill any known organism, and found, to their considerable surprise, that bacteria were still alive inside. The lethal radiation dose for a human being is approximately 10 gray units. Deinococcus radiodurans can survive doses of up to 25,000 gray, 2,500 times the human lethal dose. At this dose, the bacterium's DNA is literally fragmented into hundreds of pieces, and then, over several hours, it puts itself back together. The cell carries up to 10 redundant copies of its genome and uses those copies to reconstruct the shattered original. In a study published in 2020, Akihiko Yamagishi and colleagues placed dried pellets of Deinococcus radiodurans directly on the exterior of Japan's Kibo laboratory module on the International Space Station. Not inside a shielded container, directly on the hull, exposed to the full vacuum of space, solar radiation, cosmic rays, and temperature swings of more than 200 degrees Celsius. The pellets were left there for 3 years. When brought inside and rehydrated, the bacteria were alive, viable, still capable of growth and reproduction. The outer layers have been killed by radiation, but the cells deeper inside, shielded by their dead neighbors, had survived. 3 years in open space, living. The water bear. And then there are the tardigrades, microscopic animals, typically less than 1 millimeter long, that look, under a microscope, something like a bear with 8 stubby legs. They live everywhere on Earth, in Antarctic ice, at ocean depths, on mountain summits, in the soil of your garden, almost certainly, right now. There are more than 1,300 known species. They have been on Earth for at least 500 million years and have survived all 5 mass extinctions in the history of life. When conditions become hostile, tardigrades enter a state called cryptobiosis. They lose almost all body water, contracting to less than half their normal size. Their metabolism drops to less than 0.01% of normal. In this state, they can survive temperatures from just above absolute zero to 151 degrees Celsius. Pressures 6 times greater than the deepest ocean trench. Radiation doses more than 1,000 times the lethal human dose. In 2007, the European Space Agency placed dehydrated tardigrades on the outside of the Photon M3 spacecraft in low Earth orbit. After 10 days in open space, the spacecraft returned to Earth. The samples were rehydrated. More than 68% of those protected from the most intense UV radiation revived within 30 minutes. They moved. They fed. They produced viable eggs. Their offspring were normal. Between 2008 and 2016, the European Space Agency ran a series of experiments called EXPOSE, attaching biological samples to the exterior of the International Space Station for extended periods. Bacterial endospores survived exposure in Mars-simulated conditions for the full duration of the longest experiments. In some conditions, 100% of the endospores remained viable. The survivability of life during the space travel portion of an interplanetary journey is no longer theoretical. It has been demonstrated experimentally. These experiments do not prove that life could survive the millions of years required for interstellar transfer, but they shift the discussion. Before them, the idea of life surviving space travel seemed almost impossible. After them, it seems merely difficult. And difficult is very different from impossible when you're talking about a process that has had 4.5 billion years and billions of planetary bodies to work with. There is one more experiment worth describing in detail because it speaks directly to the most plausible route for panspermia within a solar system, the route through rock. The escape velocity of Mars, the speed needed to leave its gravitational field, is approximately 5 kilometers per second. The rocks that end up as Martian meteorites on Earth were accelerated to this speed by the shock wave from an asteroid impact. The shock pressures involved are enormous, tens of gigapascals, or hundreds of thousands of times atmospheric pressure, for fractions of a second. At these pressures, rock melts and flows. For most bacteria, these conditions would be instantly lethal. But the experiments show a more nuanced picture. The interior of a rock provides significant shielding. The pressure pulse is extremely brief. The temperature at the center of a multi-centimeter rock fragment may not rise enough to sterilize material embedded within it. Studies simulating meteorite ejection found that bacterial spores could survive the shock pressures if embedded sufficiently deep within the rock. Survival rates were low, perhaps 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 1,000,000, but not 0. And in a scenario where billions of tons of rock are ejected from a planet's surface over billions of years, even very low survival rates translate into enormous absolute numbers of potentially viable organisms reaching space. We're not talking about a single rock making a single journey. We are talking about a process that has been running for 4 billion years, ejecting uncountable numbers of fragments from multiple planetary surfaces, all of which have some probability of carrying viable. The 3 roads life could have taken. The scientific discussion of life's cosmic origins is not a single theory. It is a family of related ideas, each with different levels of evidence and different implications. There are 3 meaningfully different roads by which life or its precursors could have arrived on Earth from space. Pseudopanspermia, the ingredients arrived. In pseudopanspermia, life itself did not travel to Earth, but the chemical building blocks did. Amino acids, nucleobases, sugars, and other organic molecules formed in the interstellar medium, in molecular clouds, in the early solar system, and were delivered to the early Earth by meteorites and comets. This is no longer seriously disputed. The Hayabusa 2 mission returned samples from the asteroid Ryugu in December 2020. Analysis published in 2022 found 23 amino acids, including uracil, confirming that organic molecules capable of contributing to life's chemistry exist across the solar system. NASA's OSIRIS-RX returned samples from asteroid Bennu in 2023, finding water-bearing clay minerals and organic molecules consistent with an early solar system rich in the chemistry of life. The universe is saturated with the chemistry of life. The delivery to Earth is established science. Lithopanspermia. Life itself traveled in rock. In lithopanspermia, actual living organisms, not just their building blocks, travel between planetary bodies inside rocks. A large asteroid impacts a planet with life, blasting surface material into space. Some of that material, carrying microorganisms embedded in rock, achieves escape velocity. It drifts through space. Eventually, some fraction is captured by the gravity of another body and falls to its surface. The mechanism has been confirmed in one direction. Rocks from Mars have reached Earth. More than 300 Martian meteorites have been identified. The transfer of material between Mars and Earth is not theoretical. It happens. Whether that material could carry viable life is the unresolved question. Lithopanspermia within a solar system is considered by many astrobiologists to be genuinely plausible. Lithopanspermia between star systems is considered extremely unlikely by most researchers. Directed panspermia. Life was deliberately sent. This is the most speculative and most philosophically troubling. In directed panspermia, life was deliberately seeded on Earth by an intelligent civilization from another world. This idea was proposed formally in 1973 by Francis Crick and Leslie Orgel. Crick being the Nobel Prize laureate who co-discovered the double helix structure of DNA. We will return to Crick in Chapter 7. Directed panspermia is not dismissed as science fiction by everyone who encounters it. It is taken seriously by some researchers as a logically coherent possibility, even if evidence for it is absent. We cannot currently distinguish between a universe in which life arose by abiogenesis, arrived by natural lithopanspermia, or was deliberately seeded. The evidence does not yet reach that far. Mars, the first suspect. Of all the possible external sources for life that might have arrived on Earth, Mars is by far the most plausible, not because we have confirmed the existence of Martian life. We have not, but because of what Mars looked like in its first billion years of existence, and because of the well-established geological connection between the two planets. Mars today is a frozen desert with an atmospheric pressure less than 1% of Earth's. Surface temperatures average around minus 60 degrees Celsius. The surface is drenched in ultraviolet radiation because Mars lost its magnetic field approximately 4 billion years ago. But Mars was not always this way. Spacecraft orbiting Mars have mapped thousands of ancient features that can only have formed in the presence of liquid water. Valley networks carved by flowing rivers. Outflow channels cut by catastrophic floods. Sedimentary layering deposited by water that accumulated and drained over millions of years. Clay minerals that form only in the prolonged presence of liquid water, found across vast areas of the ancient Martian surface. The geological record shows that early Mars, before approximately 3.5 billion years ago, was a planet with a thicker atmosphere, a warmer climate, and extensive liquid water on its surface. It was, by the criteria we use for habitability, a potentially habitable world. Mars is smaller than Earth, roughly half the diameter and about 1/10 the mass. Smaller planets cool faster. Mars reached the conditions for habitability, stable liquid water, a moderating atmosphere, geochemical energy sources, before Earth did. While Earth was still being bombarded in the Hadean, still too hot for liquid water to persist, Mars may already have had standing lakes and rivers. If life arises wherever conditions allow, and if it arises rapidly, as the Luca dating suggests, then life may have appeared on Mars before it appeared on Earth. Mars may have been, in the early solar system, the first inhabited world. The Martian meteorite. In 1984, a meteorite was discovered on the Allen Hills ice sheet in Antarctica. Geochemical analysis eventually confirmed it as a piece of Mars, a rock formed on Mars 4.1 billion years ago, ejected by an asteroid impact approximately 17 million years ago, and fallen to Earth approximately 13,000 years ago. In 1996, a team led by David McKay at NASA's Johnson Space Center published a paper in Science announcing a series of findings they believed were consistent with evidence of ancient Martian microbial life. The evidence included microscopic structures resembling fossilized bacteria, carbonate minerals consistent with biological processes, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons associated with biological decay, and magnetite crystals with characteristics only known to be produced by magnetotactic bacteria. President Clinton addressed the nation from the Rose Garden. The announcement received global attention. The scientific community responded with intense skepticism. Each proposed biosignature was contested. The nanofossils were too small. The magnetite could have been non-biological. The organic molecules could be terrestrial contamination. Over the following years, the consensus moved against the biological interpretation. But the debate has never been fully closed. In 2022, Kathy Thomas-Gephardt and colleagues published a new analysis arguing that specific features of the magnetite crystals in ALH 84001 remain most parsimoniously explained by biological production. The paper argued these characteristics are found exclusively in magnetotactic bacteria on Earth and have never been produced by any known non-biological process. Martian rocks have reached Earth. The transfer mechanism is real and ongoing. Mars was habitable before Earth was. If life ever existed on Mars, the route by which it could have arrived here was open and functioning. The Perseverance rover is currently collecting rock cores from Jezero crater, samples from an ancient lakebed and river delta, where if life ever existed on Mars, signs of it are most likely to be preserved. A future sample return mission, planned for the 2030s, will bring those cores to Earth. The answer may be waiting in a freezer at the Johnson Space Center within the next 2 decades. There is a final dimension to the Mars question that is rarely discussed outside specialist circles. If life began on Mars and was transferred to Earth by lithopanspermia, if the ancestor of all terrestrial life arrived here inside a Martian rock, then Mars and Earth share a common biology. Not similar biology, the same biology, rooted in the same ancestral organism. In that scenario, the question, is there life on Mars, becomes radically different from the question we usually ask. We usually imagine Martian life, if it exists, as being alien, as using different biochemistry, different genetic molecules, as being, in some fundamental sense, other. But if life on Earth is descended from Martian life, then any surviving Martian life, retreated underground, surviving in liquid water beneath the permafrost, as many researchers believe is possible, would not be alien at all. It would be our distant cousin, sharing the same genetic code, the same 20 amino acids, the same chirality, the same fundamental biochemistry. We might share ancestors with anything still alive beneath the Martian surface. The tree of life that we draw rooted in Luca might have its true root not on Earth at all, but on a world 225 million kilometers away, whose surface is now a frozen desert under a sky too thin for rain. The search for life on Mars is not, or not only, a search for the alien. It may be a search for our own origins. The man who discovered DNA asked this question. To understand why Francis Crick's contribution matters so much, you first need to understand who Francis Crick was. Crick was born in England in 1916 and trained as a physicist before shifting to biology after the Second World War. In 1953, working at the Cavendish Laboratory in Cambridge with James Watson and drawing critically on X-ray crystallography data produced by Rosalind Franklin, Crick and Watson determined the double helix structure of DNA. The discovery of the DNA double helix is one of the most consequential scientific findings in the history of biology. Crick received the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 1962. He was not a man given to speculation. He was rigorous, mathematically literate, and deeply skeptical of ideas without evidence. When Francis Crick thought carefully about a question and published his conclusions, people paid attention. In 1973, Crick and chemist Leslie Orgel published a paper in the journal Icarus titled Directed Panspermia. Crick and Orgel's argument began with an observation about the genetic code. All life on Earth uses the same genetic code, the same mapping of DNA sequences to amino acids. This code is universal. Bacteria use it. Oak trees use it. Humans use it. The same mapping, preserved identically across all of life for billions of years. This universality strongly implies a single origin, a single ancestral population from which all life descended. But why this particular code? The relationship between specific codons and specific amino acids appears, in most cases, arbitrary. There is no obvious chemical reason why one three-letter sequence should code for glycine and another for alanine. The code works, but it does not appear to be uniquely optimal. Crick noted that this apparent arbitrariness is consistent with what you would expect if the code were fixed early in life's history, before evolution had time to optimize it, and then preserved by what biologists call the frozen accident. Once a code is established and the entire biochemical machinery is built around it, any change to the code is lethal. So the code could not evolve even if a better one existed. This frozen accident could have happened on Earth, but it could equally have happened elsewhere, on another world where life arose earlier, and then been delivered to Earth, prepackaged with the code already fixed. Crick and Orgel proposed that an advanced extraterrestrial civilization, facing an uncertain future, might have deliberately sent microbial life to other planets in an unmanned spacecraft. The microbes would be in a dormant state, protected from radiation, and upon arrival at a suitable planet, they would begin seeding life. They acknowledged that direct evidence was absent. They were not claiming it had happened. They were arguing it was not inconsistent with the known science, and that certain features of life on Earth, particularly the universality of the genetic code, are not inconsistent with it. Crick returned to this question in his 1981 book Life Itself. He wrote, "An honest man, armed with all the knowledge available to us now, could only state that in some sense, the origin of life appears at the moment to be almost a miracle. So many are the conditions which would have had to have been satisfied to get it going." He was not a man who used the word miracle lightly. He was looking for a mechanism. Most astrobiologists today do not accept directed panspermia. Invoking an intelligent cause moves the problem rather than solving it. If life was seeded here deliberately, where did the sender's life come from? And we have no evidence of the spacecraft, the senders, or any signal of their existence. But the fact that Crick, the co-discoverer of DNA, the man who understood the molecular basis of life better than almost anyone of his generation, found the random, rapid emergence of life from chemistry difficult to accept deserves to be taken seriously, not as proof of anything, but as a signal that the question is genuinely hard, that the answer is not obvious, that the honest position is not certainty, but continued inquiry. What the universe is made of. Every piece of evidence we have examined tonight, the Murchison meteorite, the Luca timeline, the bacteria on the space station, Mars, Oumuamua, Francis Crick, sits inside a context that is larger than any of them individually. That context is the chemistry of the cosmos itself. So you are made of stars. You are made of atoms. The hydrogen atoms in the water in your cells are almost as old as time itself, produced in the first 3 minutes after the Big Bang, 13.8 billion years ago. The carbon that forms the backbone of every organic molecule in your body, the oxygen you breathe, the nitrogen in your DNA, the phosphorus in your ADP, the iron in your hemoglobin, none of these were made in the Big Bang. They were made inside stars. Stars are nuclear furnaces. In their cores, hydrogen is fused into helium. When the hydrogen runs out, heavier elements are forged, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, in a series of nested shells burning hotter and faster until the core is iron. Then the core collapses, and the outer layers explode in a supernova, scattering across space all the elements the star spent millions of years building. The carbon in your DNA was forged inside a star that exploded before our sun was born. The oxygen in your lungs was scattered in a stellar death billions of years ago. The iron in your blood has been through the death of a star. You are, in the most literal, chemical, physical sense, made of stardust. Not metaphorically. Actually. Radio telescopes have detected more than 200 different molecules in the interstellar medium. Formaldehyde, methanol, glycolaldehyde, a simple sugar. In 2021, astronomers using the ALMA telescope array detected ethanolamine in a molecular cloud near the galactic center, the simplest molecule containing carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen in the combination used to build phospholipids, the molecules that form the membranes of all living cells. The precursors of cell membranes exist in interstellar space. In 2016, the Rosetta spacecraft detected glycine in the atmosphere of Comet 67P. Glycine, the simplest amino acid, the same one found in Murchison. The same comet also contained phosphorus, one of the 6 elements essential to all known life. The universe is producing the chemistry of life continuously, in vast quantities, across its entire volume. The interstellar medium is not a void. It is a chemistry laboratory, cold and vast, continuously synthesizing the molecules that, given the right conditions, assemble into the components of living cells. There are approximately 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe. Our own Milky Way contains approximately 200 to 400 billion stars. Studies by the Kepler Space Telescope established that roughly 1 in 5 Sun-like stars has an Earth-sized planet in its habitable zone. That gives, in our galaxy alone, somewhere between 40 and 80 billion potentially habitable planets. Each of those planets, if it formed from a solar nebula with sufficient carbon abundance, received the same rain of organic chemistry that the early Earth received. The chemistry of life is not a peculiarity of one star system. It is the chemistry of the universe. In this context, the question of whether life on Earth came from space is not a question about the exceptional or the improbable. It is a question about whether the organic delivery service that the universe runs continuously everywhere actually contributed to the origin of a specific living system in a specific place, this planet, 4 billion years ago. We do not know the answer, but we know the deliveries were made. The question is whether any of them contain something more than raw materials. The Murchison meteorite, the ISS experiments, Mars, Oumuamua, Francis Crick. We have now covered the specific pieces of evidence. Before we move to the conclusion, I want to step back and consider what kind of question we have actually been investigating. The question is not simply did life come from space. That question, asked baldly, can sound like a question about a single event. A rock arriving, life disembarking. The deeper question is about the relationship between chemistry and life at the scale of the universe. About whether life is something that happens locally, a peculiarity of one planet's chemistry, possibly unique in the cosmos, or whether life is something the universe does as naturally and inevitably as it forms stars and galaxies and planetary systems. If life is local, then we are alone. Not necessarily alone in the universe. The universe is too vast for certainty about that. But alone in the sense that life is a rare accident, something that happened here by a combination of circumstances unlikely to be repeated often. If life is cosmic, if it is a product of the physics and chemistry that governs the entire universe, if it arises wherever conditions allow and travels between worlds, then we are not alone in any sense. We are embedded in a living cosmos, one that has been producing and distributing and connecting life across its volume for billions of years. These are not just scientific questions. They are questions about what we are, about whether our existence is an anomaly or an expression, about whether the universe is indifferent to us or whether it has, in some sense that is not mystical but purely physical, been tending toward us all along. Science cannot yet answer these questions at their deepest level, but it is beginning to assemble the evidence that will eventually make an answer possible. And the direction in which it is pointing is toward a universe that is less empty and less indifferent than we assumed. The messenger from another star. On the evening of October 19th, 2017, Robert Warwick, an astronomer at the University of Hawaii, was reviewing data from the Pan-STARRS 1 telescope at the summit of Haleakala volcano on Maui when he noticed something moving through the inner solar system at a speed that made no sense. Objects born in our solar system are gravitationally bound to the sun. They move at speeds consistent with their orbital position. This object was moving faster than the solar escape velocity at its distance from the sun. It had not come from within our solar system. It had come from between the stars. What Warwick had found was the first confirmed interstellar object ever detected passing through our solar system. It was designated 1I/2017 U1, the I standing for interstellar. The discovery team named it Oumuamua, from the Hawaiian, meaning a messenger from afar arriving first. Its speed at the time of discovery was 87.3 kilometers per second relative to the sun, 196,000 miles per hour. For comparison, the New Horizons spacecraft, the fastest human-made object ever launched, travels at approximately 14 kilometers per second. Oumuamua was moving 6 times faster. Its shape, inferred from the way its brightness varied as it rotated, suggested something highly elongated, perhaps 400 meters long and only 40 meters wide. The length-to-width ratio was greater than any natural asteroid or comet ever observed in our solar system. It had no comet tail. Every comet that passes close to the sun develops a visible coma, a cloud of gas and dust boiled off by solar heat. Observers pointed the world's most powerful telescopes at Oumuamua. No coma, no tail, no detectable outgassing of any kind. And then there was its acceleration. As Oumuamua moved away from the sun, it was accelerating slightly more than gravity alone could account for. This non-gravitational acceleration is observed in comets, caused by outgassing pushing the object like a rocket. But Oumuamua had no detected outgassing. The acceleration was real. Its cause was not immediately explainable. In November 2018, Avi Loeb of Harvard and Shmuel Bialy published a paper in the Astrophysical Journal Letters proposing that Oumuamua's acceleration could be explained if the object were an extremely thin, flat structure, perhaps a fraction of a millimeter in thickness, being accelerated by radiation pressure from the sun, like a solar sail. They were careful to note this as a possibility that could not be ruled out, not as a claim that it was artificial. In March 2023, astrophysicists Jennifer Bergner and Daryl Seligman published what is now considered the most plausible natural explanation in Nature. They proposed that Oumuamua was an interstellar comet whose water ice, irradiated by cosmic rays over millions of years, had accumulated trapped molecular hydrogen. As it approached the sun and warmed, this hydrogen was released, providing the thrust that explained the acceleration, without producing the visible dust hail that water outgassing would normally create. This explanation is currently considered the most scientifically credible by most astronomers. Whether Oumuamua was a hydrogen ice comet, a nitrogen ice fragment, or something else entirely, its passage establishes that interstellar objects travel through our solar system. Each one is, in principle, a chemical sample from another star system. The Vera C. Rubin Observatory, which entered operations in 2024, is expected to detect approximately 1 interstellar object per year. Oumuamua passed within 15 million miles of Earth, and if it was carrying the chemistry of another solar system's early history, some small fraction of that chemistry may have been shed during its passage through our inner solar system. The galaxy, it turns out, is not as isolated as we assumed. Things move between star systems. Things have always moved between star systems. We just started noticing in 2017. There is something almost unbearable about the Oumuamua story, if you let yourself feel it properly. Something from another star system, a piece of a world around a sun that is not ours, passed through our neighborhood in 2017. It had been traveling through the void between stars for perhaps hundreds of millions of years. It entered our solar system, swung around the sun, and departed. Total transit time through the inner solar system, a few weeks. In those few weeks, every telescope that could be pointed at it was pointed at it. Astronomers abandoned their scheduled observations, submitted emergency requests for telescope time, and stared as hard as they could. They measured its brightness, its color, its trajectory, its acceleration. They built models and argued about them. They published papers and revised them. And then it was gone, too faint a track, beyond our reach forever. We will never know with certainty what it was. We will never know what star it came from. We will never know whether it carried organic chemistry from another solar system. We know one thing. It existed. The space between the stars is not empty. Interstellar objects travel through our solar system. There will be others. And the next time one comes, if we find it early enough, there are people who have already designed spacecraft capable of intercepting it. A rapid response mission, launched on short notice, capable of catching an interstellar object and studying it at close range. The plans exist. The technology is within reach. What is needed is an object we find early enough to intercept. The Verisi Rubin Observatory will find them. And what is the honest answer? We have spent tonight moving through the evidence. All of it. Systematically and carefully. And now I want to give you the most honest answer that science currently possesses. We do not know where life on Earth came from. That is the answer. Not as a concession or a failure, but as a genuine scientific statement about the current state of knowledge. And it is more meaningful than either a confident yes or a confident no. We have established that the building blocks of life, amino acids, nucleobases, sugars, are found in meteorites, in comets, and in interstellar molecular clouds. The universe produces the chemistry of life as a routine product of its physics and chemistry, everywhere that the right elements and energy sources are present. We have established that among the organic molecules in the Murchison meteorite, there is a slight but real excess of left-handed amino acids, the same chirality that all life on Earth uses. The cosmos appears to have a bias toward the chemistry that life requires. We have established that life appeared on Earth within perhaps 100 to 200 million years of the first stable liquid water, with a last universal common ancestor that was already a complex organism, encoding 2,600 proteins and possessing a primitive immune system. We have established that certain extremophile organisms can survive the conditions of space for years. The bacterium Deinococcus radiodurans survived 3 years on the exterior of the International Space Station. Tardigrades survived 10 days in open space and reproduced normally upon return to Earth. We have established that material from Mars has reached Earth. More than 300 Martian meteorites have been identified. Mars was habitable before Earth was. If life ever existed on Mars, the route by which it could have arrived here was open and functioning. We have established that interstellar objects pass through our solar system. Oumuamua passed within 15 million miles of Earth in 2017, carrying the chemical signature of an organic-rich surface. And we have established that Francis Crick, the co-discoverer of DNA, found the rapid emergence of life from chemistry extraordinarily difficult to accept, and proposed a formal scientific hypothesis that life may have been deliberately delivered to Earth by an advanced extraterrestrial civilization. We do not know whether the organic molecules delivered to early Earth by meteorites and comets contributed to the origin of life. We do not know whether life ever existed on Mars. We do not know whether life could survive interplanetary transfer in sufficient quantities for the seeding of a new planet to be probable. We do not know what Oumuamua was exactly, and we do not know what the origin of life actually was. The basic mechanism remains the deepest unsolved problem in biology. You were made of atoms that were forged in dying stars. Those atoms, as they drifted through space, assembled into molecules that appear in meteorites older than the sun. Some of those molecules are the same molecules that make you. Whether any of the chemistry that assembled into the first living cell on Earth arrived from space, or whether it all began here, we genuinely do not know. What we know is that you are part of a continuous chain of chemistry that extends back 4.2 billion years on this planet, and possibly much longer before that, in the stars that built the atoms you are made of. You are not separate from the universe. You are an expression of it, a local, temporary, extraordinarily complex arrangement of matter that the universe has been producing the ingredients for since long before the Earth existed. Whether the beginning of your particular chain of chemistry happened here or arrived from somewhere else changes nothing about what you are, but it changes everything about how we understand our place in the cosmos. We are not necessarily native to this planet. We may be visitors who have been here so long that we have forgotten where we came from. Or we may have begun here, and everything that arrived from space was simply raw material that we assembled into ourselves. Both answers are extraordinary. Both are consistent with the evidence. I want to leave you with one last thought. The question of life's origin, whether it began here or arrived, whether it is rare or universal, is one of the oldest questions human beings have asked. It predates science. It appears in the myths and religions of every culture. It is the question behind every prayer ever directed at the night sky. Where do we come from? Science has been approaching an answer for centuries. It has established things that would have seemed magical to anyone born before 1900. That the atoms in your body were forged in stars, that amino acids fall from the sky in meteorites, that bacteria can survive in space, that Mars once had rivers, that something from another star system visited our neighborhood in 2017. And yet the core question remains open, not because science is failing, but because it is genuinely hard. Because the origin of life is a problem that requires understanding chemistry, geology, planetary science, astronomy, evolutionary biology, and physics all at once. And because the event we are trying to understand happened 4 billion years ago in conditions we cannot fully recreate. The honest position is not embarrassing. It is the correct one. We have learned an enormous amount. We have more to learn, and we are getting better instruments and clever methods every year. The Perseverance rover is drilling cores on Mars right now. The Vera C. Rubin Observatory is searching the sky for the next interstellar visitor. Laboratories around the world are running origin of life chemistry experiments with reagents and conditions we had never considered before. The James Webb Space Telescope is probing the atmospheres of exoplanets for chemical signatures that might indicate the presence of life. We are, for the first time in the history of our species, in a position to make real progress on this question. And when the answer comes, whatever it is, it will change everything about how we understand ourselves and our place in the cosmos. Until then, the appropriate response is what we have practiced tonight. Patient attention to what is known, honest acknowledgement of what is not, and the willingness to sit with a question that is bigger than any available answer. That is what science is. That is what curiosity is. That is what you're doing right now, in the dark, listening to the universe, trying to understand itself through the particular arrangement of matter that is you. You are going to sleep tonight. You still can. Rest well. The universe has been at this for 13.8 billion years. It is in no hurry, and neither are we.